reduction formally of apartheid in 1948 since the arrival of colonists in 1652. So for us to expect this to be turned around in just 3 decades is a little bit naive. That's not to say that the current government is not guilty of things like complete ineptitude in the state, failure of delivering services, corruption and nepotism. But I think that the current problems are very, very historically related. And I think that the conversations that are being had at this point in time are largely excluding young people. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I am quite hopeful with the so-called new government of national unity that's been announced and appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Some people regard it as a grand coalition. It's not really a government of national unity per se, but it's drawn in not only the ANC that dropped to 40% in the election, but also the main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance. And the encouraging thing for me has been the appointment of a lot of young people to ministerial posts and to deputy ministerial posts. I mean, let's look at a couple of the appointments and rejoice, really. I mean, Ronald Lamola is a late 30-year-old that's been appointed to the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation. He is, of course, leading South Africa's fight against Israel in the International Criminal Court and flying the flag very high for Palestine. The Deputy Minister of Finance is a young man by the name of Asher Siripin from the Democratic Alliance. And there's also been various other appointments of young people to critical ministerial posts. And look, all I hope is that they do retain their voice and they don't become co-opted into an administration that just really gets swallowed up in bureaucracy, because every single other revolution, every single other violent uprising in history, whether or not it's Africa or elsewhere in the world, it has happened when there is young, disengaged people with nothing to do and with nothing that keeps them joined in the society with the hope of a better tomorrow. And I think we've already seen the curtain raise of what can happen in South Africa if the politicians continue to ignore the voice of the young people in places like Kenya. That's why I say the South African government needs to catch a serious wake up and realize that young people in South Africa don't want a handout, they want a hand up.
Tessa, do you agree? Are there reasons here to be optimistic? Will there be space for new voices to emerge with this new coalition?
Well, I think the new coalition has both opportunities, but also a lot of challenges. The coalition, number one, has been brought together by sheer convenience. And so this is a coalition of the willing and a coalition of convenience, rather than one that's based on a clear path and a clear plan. In terms of the addition of younger people, our politics is such that younger people who get involved in politics have faced that they are really brought into the system at the mercy of older politicians, at the mercy of big political structures and edifice that doesn't give a lot of space. And so they often find themselves trapped in political structures that don't give them much space to move, much space to breathe, or much space to actually represent their own views or their own vision for society. And so if young people who are coming into this as either in government or in parliament, that's meant to hold the executive to account, if they are to actually produce anything, they're going to have to build constituencies of their own. And those constituencies can be made of the masses and masses, the millions of young people that are disaffected by politics today. But it's going to take them breaking our mold of politics, the ways in which politics works. Because one of the big issues that young people across the board have with politics is that politicians are beholden to political parties and only the political parties and their bosses. And so they don't have a relationship between politicians and representatives, whether they are ministers or they're parliamentarians or even in local councils. We just don't have those kinds of relationships where our politicians take us seriously in between the vote. I mean, they barely take young people seriously when the vote needs to happen. But definitely in between the vote, we need to use this as an opportunity, number one, to play politicians up against each other. I honestly think that having more politicians in the same room means that their interests are more divided rather than united. I always chuckle at the idea that the N in the G, or the U in the GNU is silent, that there's not a lot of unity amongst those people. And so we can use that to play it up against each other, to make sure that they become the watchdogs of each other and we become their watchdogs. Young people have an opportunity here to get more involved in holding the state accountable, holding parliamentarians accountable. And I think if they do that, if there's a pressure campaign from young people from the streets to the politicians, I think that there's more of an opportunity. But to assume that just having young faces in the room is going to change everything is to ignore that our politics is beholden to a lot of structural interests and a lot of political interests and very little room for politicians to actually engage and be engaged by citizens.
So we are in the precipice of a new era here, potentially, of politics. I want to turn the end of the show into a discussion about the future, because we also asked our community online for a statement about what their hopes are. Take a listen.
My hope for the future of South Africa is a more equal and accessible future for everyone.
It's a South Africa where everyone experiences economic freedom, especially young people, and that our decision makers actually address the problems that we're facing on the ground.
My hope is for hope, to see my fellow young people beginning to imagine a future beyond our current stagnation.
A South Africa where young people are empowered to drive positive change, both for themselves and for generations to come.
For people from all backgrounds, from all ethnicities, all languages to participate meaningfully in building South Africa and for it to have a better future.
Because our future is literally in our hands as young people. So if we are not knowledgeable, we can never succeed as a country.
And I think as long as the collective is willing to fight for freedom, is willing to fight for change, there is always hope for the future of South Africa.
Samantha and Philani, I would like your take here on this new era of politics, this new coalition of 11 parties that will have to fight to get the youth involved as well and on their side. What are your hopes? What do you expect for the next few months and the next few years? Samantha, you go first.
So for the next few months, I think that the one thing we hope is that the government of national unity actually works. That's probably the most important thing that I hope. And that those that are in parliament that are younger, of the younger generation, actually gets to empower the younger generation. My hope for South Africans long term is that South Africa actually, in my generation, that we get to see equality. And by equality, I don't just mean liberation. It is equality in terms of equity. Equity distribution in South Africa is a big thing. And if we get to see that, I think South Africa will become one of the most amazing countries in the world, because we already live in an amazing country. But you cannot have so many resources in this country and so many technocrats in the country. You look at the panel and you can see these are intellectuals, and not be able to see this in parliament and in South Africa. So that's something that I hope I get to see in my lifetime.
Philani, your take here. What is your expectation for the future?
My expectations are politicians to stop being corrupt, politicians to care for the citizens of South Africa. Load shedding needs to come to an end, and we need to fix the unemployment that is happening in this country. That's my future.
Quite a few very tall tasks there, and difficult times ahead, I would say, difficult challenges at least. Nicolaus, one final word from you. What do you think this coalition's biggest challenge will be in the next few months, and what is your hope for South Africa?
I believe that the Government of National Unity has a real challenge in terms of finding a common voice and a meaningful practical strategy that uplifts the life of all South Africans. We live in an extremely diverse country with a lot of competing interests, and I just hope that there's at least one or two common threads that can be found among all of the disparate parties within the Government of National Unity, actually find a way forward that benefits the majority of the people in the country. But I would actually encourage all South Africans that in the years to come, not only in the months to come, try and find the ways that you can make a difference in your own community. I think that we were lulled into a false sense of security in 1994, where we really had a handful of leaders that were lionized and really painted as absolute saints. I'm talking about Nelson Mandela. He was a great man, but he was only one man, and kind of lulled us into a false sense of security that every generation there's going to be an angelic figure that saves us from ourselves. South Africans can only save themselves, and that is done by finding other like-minded South Africans to try and change the places where we live, the communities where we call home, and try and hold our leaders accountable. And sooner rather than later, you'll find many other South Africans willing to walk shoulder to shoulder with you to change the face of your community.
Tessa, I would like a final word from you. What is your hope for the future of South Africa?
My main hope for the future of South Africa is that young people take power and really take power to themselves, to their communities, and to the spaces that they are operating to build the future. Young people are the basis for every generation and what comes next. And if democracy is going to mean anything, it means that this generation of young people need to have the space to innovate our democracy. Nothing must be sacrosanct. If institutions must be changed, they must be changed. If the way that we structure our economy must be changed, must be changed. But we must have the space, and young people must have the space to actually take back power into their own hands and reshape democracy. Because if the people shall govern, then it's not the government that shall govern. It's truly the people that must have the opportunity to make democracy what works for us rather than something that constrains us.
Power to the young people, then. Thank you so much, Tessa, Nicolaus, Philani, and Samantha, for joining us here on the stream today. It's been amazing having you guide us through the reality for young people in South Africa today. I also want to thank everyone in our community that contributed to this episode. And as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to stay in touch with us online. We love hearing your feedback and suggestions. Keep using the hashtag or the handle AJStream. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
A revolutionary South Sudanese leader who fought in a brutal 21-year civil war and went on to become Sudan's first vice president.
A new Sudanese commonality to which we all identify.
What happened next is still a mystery. Al Jazeera World tells the story of John Garang, a mysterious death on Al Jazeera.
It's Monday, July the 22nd. Here's your headlines for the Americas. Here's what you should know. We've got showers and storms stretching from New Mexico right into the Carolinas. I think it will potentially be worse for North Carolina. All this energy is working up the eastern seaboard, finding it in the mid-Atlantic. And then, oh yeah, there's also some showers and storms for Ontario province in Canada. But really, the big story, at least in the west, is all this heat for British Columbia's interior. Same goes for the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. The further you head away from the coast, it heats up, and there are heat alerts in play there. Up and down the coast of California, it's looking good. Plenty of sun. Look at that, warm for this time of the year in San Francisco. That's on the high side at 26 degrees. And to Central America, for the Eastern Caribbean, we've had some hot nights there. Martinique now joining the club of setting some records. Doused with rain from Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. And away we go to South America. It's been wet for the Guyanas and Suriname. That will continue on Monday. And then winds have turned around. So there's a warm breeze from the Argentine Pampas right down to Patagonia. That heat also extending into Asuncion, where it is going to get hotter by the day. Could close in on your hottest July day on record on Wednesday at 33 degrees. See you later.
Heavy rains have caused the River Gash to burst its banks. Small villages in the delta were the first to suffer. These women have decided to take the risk. They need to go to town and look for help for their families.
They need tents, food, and just about everything else.
Some of the families that have managed to escape are now living here in these little shelters of stick and straw. Their property, their farming land, as well as their homes have all been submerged. Local authorities believe that between 5,000 and 6,000 people have been affected, and they're afraid this might only be the beginning.
I'm Neve Barker. This is the News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, Kamala Harris launches her campaign to become the US Democratic presidential nominee, winning support from dozens of members in Congress. President Joe Biden has also endorsed Harris, but she could yet face a contest at the Democratic convention next month. Israel launches a new operation in Gaza. At least 45 Palestinians have been killed in Khan Yunis, while journalists also come under attack. And a report by Doctors Without Borders says civilians in Sudan are suffering horrendous levels of violence in the conflict. Thanks for joining us. It's 1300 GMT, and we begin in the United States, where a growing number of top Democrats are throwing their support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to become the party's presidential nominee. President Joe Biden was quick to endorse Harris to run in his place, but despite this support, she will not automatically become the nominee, and it's not yet clear what the process will be. This follows President Joe Biden's sudden decision to drop out of the White House race on Sunday after weeks of concern about his age and his health. Meanwhile, Republicans have responded by attacking Harris. The Trump campaign released this video criticizing her political record, with Trump saying the vice president will be easier to beat than Biden. Well, in a moment, we'll get reaction from Capitol Hill with Shihab Batanzi, but first let's cross to Kimberly Halkett, who's standing by at the White House. And Kimberly, clearly there is an awful lot of momentum growing behind Kamala Harris. Biden, of course, throwing his support behind her, but there are still key high-profile Democratic figures, Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, former President Barack Obama, yet to endorse her. So what's going on?
Yeah, that's right. And they were instrumental in nudging the President Joe Biden out. And this was a coordinated strategy. And this fact that they have also not endorsed Kamala Harris, we should add Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, the top Democrats in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, respectively, as well. They have decided that this is important because given the fact that Kamala Harris could potentially be the first female president, it is important to have her look as if she has earned this, that if she is just sort of coronated, if you will, that will open her up to scrutiny that she didn't really earn the position. And that is important that the voters see that she has actually worked the phone, something that we know she did on Sunday for making some 100 phone calls. And she's already reaped the benefits of that. In terms of endorsement, she's already had more than 180 members of Congress on the Democratic side endorse her and 12 Democratic governors across the country. So this is a strategy, and we expect that in the coming days that those four that were very instrumental in seeing the shift in having Joe Biden step aside and Kamala Harris now working to become the Democratic presidential nominee, that they will ultimately endorse her.
And Kimberly, it is a month until the Democratic National Convention. So what exactly, given all of this, will happen now?
Yeah, well, what we've got now is what's known as an open convention. It's a little bit chaotic. We haven't seen this in really decades. And what this means is that those delegates are now free to vote for whomever they want. They don't just automatically pass to Kamala Harris. So the bottom line in all of this is that she's got to earn their vote. And that's what she's been doing. She's, again, been working the phones. She'll continue to work the phones. She's got to solidify support. And right now, there's been a bit of a division in the Democratic Party, but that is slowly coalescing around Kamala Harris. Anyone who thought they might be able to run against her has realized very quickly that that is not going to happen. Just to give you a sense of how quickly she has been able to get her support, just in the last 24 hours, the grassroots donations to the Democratic Party has totaled some $50 million, with Kamala supposedly at the top of the ticket. So, in other words, that division is quickly evaporating. So if anyone wanted to challenge her, they're quickly looking at the possibility of being her running mate.
All right, yeah, exactly. Who will take that job is going to be very, very interesting to find out, isn't it, Kimberly? Many thanks for that. Kimberly Halkett at the White House. Let's go to Shihab Batanzi. who joins us from Capitol Hill. And Shihab, I understand lawmakers were there for something very different, to discuss the ramifications of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But has there been any reaction from lawmakers there about this decision at the helm of the Democrats?
Well, as far as Democratic members of Congress are concerned, it's very much, just to build on what Kimberly was saying, those potentially competing impulses. On the one hand, wanting some kind of competitive process, wanting, in Kamala Harris's words, for her to earn the nomination. Fears, frankly, of her disastrous run for president in 2020 when she dropped out before the first contest in Ohio because she was just doing so badly she couldn't even win her own state. So there's that fear, wanting her to earn, wanting her to be tested. But then also this other impulse, this competing impulse of wanting to coalesce and unite very quickly so that they can take the fight to Donald Trump. And I think, as Kimberly was suggesting, we have to see now how that plays out, because we don't really know, as you said, actually, how this is even going to work, how, you know, what the actual mechanisms concerned are going to be. The Republicans are already threatening legal actions if Kamala Harris is nominated at the top of the ticket after the primaries having already been having taken place, having had Joe Biden already been put on the ballot in various states. Meanwhile, actually, the Republicans also beginning to suggest that they're going to start pushing for Joe Biden to relinquish the presidency immediately. The argument being, well, if he can't run for president, how can he be president right now? Surely this is a national security issue. So we expect those sorts of calls from the Republicans to be ramping up. And then, yes, as Kimberly said, I suppose we're waiting for those endorsements from Hakeem Jeffries in the House, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, Nancy Pelosi, who wields so much power still here in Congress, and Barack Obama. They're competing theories as to why they hadn't yet endorsed Kamala Harris. It was Joe Biden's day yesterday. It was a day of history. So, yeah, that's what everyone's looking at as well. Will they now endorse, or will they support some kind of competitive process? There was a bit of excitement this morning. Joe Manchin, the independent senator who caucuses with the Democrats, suggested he would challenge Kamala Harris in an early morning interview, but an hour later then he withdrew his suggestion that he would be running against her. He's very much on the right of the party, the nominal left of the party, all lining up behind Kamala Harris, Congressional Progressive Caucus, members of the so-called squad, they're all lining up. So, yeah, it's just those two competing instincts now that we have to keep an eye on in the coming hours.
All right, Shihab, an awful lot to keep our eyes on in the coming hours, undoubtedly. Shihab Rattansi, live on Capitol Hill. Let's bring in Janelle King, who is a Republican analyst and joins us from Sandy Springs in the U.S. state of Georgia. A very warm welcome to you, Janelle. So, I mean, what from Donald Trump's team now, I guess? I mean, he has focused his entire attack on undermining Biden's abilities. He now faces a younger woman of color. Have the rules of the game now changed for the Republicans?
I don't think it should. Some may say that the rules have changed. I personally do not, particularly as a Black woman. I see this as an opportunity for the Republican Party to continue to stay the course of the resemblance of normalcy. The thing about it is there are a lot of people, particularly in America here, where we are seeing 70% of our base saying that they don't want neither Trump or Biden. And when you see something like that, the best thing for the president to do, President Trump to do, is to stand in a normalcy, stand in a state of calm. When you start to create more chaos or interject yourself into the chaos that the Democrat Party is now underneath, now you're adding yourself to the problem. Allow them to work this out on their own. There's a lot of issues when it comes to Kamala. I'm hoping we get towards that. However, to answer your question, I don't think the Republican Party should do anything. I think we need to stay focused on our messaging, stay focused on the economy, and stay focused on the things that the American people are feeling and not what's happening in the political world.
Nevertheless, I mean, Donald Trump hasn't resisted getting involved in commenting at least on what Kamala Harris may mean to him as a running mate. I mean, Trump described Kamala Harris as an easier opponent. I mean, is he putting a brave face in all of this?
No, I don't think he is. I think that's actually a fact. Kamala Harris is an interesting candidate. The reason why I say that is because when she ran for president in 2020, I think it was 2020. Yeah, when she ran for president, she came in around 2%. She got about 2% of the vote as a Black woman during a time where the racial conversation was so heightened. Not to mention, she does have a prosecution record that is not favorable to Black men. And the problem that the Democrat Party has is that while you're trying to maintain Black women, you are losing Black men. And that will somehow create a scenario where you're canceling out those votes. So it doesn't matter at all. And that's what we saw here in Georgia in 2022 when Herschel Walker lost, and we saw our governor win because he had the support of Black men. The fact of the matter is they are in a very unique conundrum. What I am going to be watching for is who will be the VP candidate should Kamala come out of the convention. Without having President Obama's endorsement, I think it's going to be really tough for her to come out of the convention. Once he speaks up and speaks out, a lot of her endorsements may shift or they may weaken. So it's interesting to see what happens there.
I mean, the suggestion is that this may well be a delaying tactic from the like of Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi to firstly keep the media attention on the Democratic Party, to starve Donald Trump of the oxygen of publicity, and then eventually end up supporting Kamala Harris. What do you think of that? Is there some master Democrat strategy going on here?
I was with you in the beginning part, but the end, I think we see a little bit differently. So in the beginning, yes, I do think that this is a strategy in order to keep the Democrat Party in the forefront of the media, because the Republican Party and President Trump, we are really good at dominating the media. And I think this is where they do see that opportunity. However, I am watching to see where this goes. I think President Obama sees the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is that you cannot win with Black women alone. You cannot win with the Black vote alone. You have to bring in so many others. Now, where we do see a hemorrhaging on the Republican Party side of women, women voters, particularly around the abortion topic, they're now starting to kind of simmer down because our Republican nominee is not as vocal about the abortion topic as some of our other Republicans. So I am interested to see what happens there. But I think President Obama sees that the writing is on the wall, that Kamala is going to be a tough one to pull across the aisle. She has not polled higher than President Trump. So we don't know if they're trying to figure out if they are now leaving one candidate to jump into another losing candidate, and then we end up losing, or they end up losing altogether. So as Republicans, we are watching this to see what they're going to do, but I personally don't see it being Kamala Harris.
All right, Janelle, before I go, let me ask you something else, because some Republicans are clamoring for Joe Biden to leave office now, arguing that if he's not fit to run for office, he's not fit to be commander-in-chief. Does that help the Republicans in some way?
I personally disagree with that strategy. The reason being is because that would automatically move Kamala Harris into the space of president, and then you'll get to see her as a president. And God forbid she does something that then pulls her base back together. That would then hurt the Republican Party. So I'm thinking that the best course of action right now is to allow it to play out. We obviously cannot have a White House that's void of a president. So asking Biden to leave without a replacement that I believe will do a job that the Republican Party is looking towards, it's just not going to happen, right? We just have to win in November. Allow him to finish out the term, and then we just go ahead and win in November.
All right, Janelle, good to talk to you. Good to hear your analysis. Janelle King, Republican analyst there, joining us from the U.S. state of Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Biden's decision came just days before he's set to meet the Israeli Prime Minister in Washington. Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to reporters before boarding his flight to the U.S. and thanked President Biden for supporting the war on Gaza.
I plan to see President Biden, whom I've known for over 40 years. This will be an opportunity to thank him for the things he did for Israel in the war and during his